everyone, this is Showtime 112. Most fighter planes of the US Army Air Force in World War II differed in one thing from their counterparts in other services and countries. They relied on machine guns instead of cannons as their primary weapons. This approach continued into the jet age, and independent US Air Force went to the Korean War with machine gun-armed Shooting Stars, Thunderbolts, and Sabres. F-86 Sabre carried 6 12.7mm machine guns, which offered some advantages over their opponent's armament. The machine guns were quite reliable, their number offered redundancy, and high rate of fire increased the chances of achieving hits. But their effectiveness against jets was reduced compared to prop fighters. Jet engines were simpler, they lacked a large propeller, and the airframes themselves were more rugged to endure their extended flight envelope. Furthermore, jet fuel was less volatile, and fighting mostly took place at very high altitude, where armor-piercing incendiary round had less oxygen to burn. Many MiGs could easily fly back to their bases despite multiple hits. The US Air Force was relatively slow to respond, but eventually a project called Gunval was launched. This project tested primarily the installation of 4 20mm cannons to F-86 Sabre. The cannon selected for the testing was T-160, later known as M39, which was based on a German World War II design. Compared to the 12.7mm machine gun, the cannon round was almost 2.5 times heavier, while the muzzle velocity was 15% greater. This meant shorter time of flight, flatter trajectory, longer range, and greater impact. Even the rate of fire was greater. Testing showed that precision of the 12.7mm machine guns was better at ranges up to 600 yards, but the 20mm cannon was superior beyond that range. Cannons had some significant disadvantages too. Only 460 rounds could be carried, compared to 1600 rounds of 12.7mm ammo. This reduced the total firing time from 16 seconds down to 4.6. Extra weight and increased recoil also affected the aircraft performance. US Air Force installed the T-160 cannons in 4 F-86Es and 6 86Fs, and these airframes were given the designation F-86F-2. In March 1952, testing was performed at altitudes between 10 and 25,000 feet. You might notice that in Korea, combat usually took place at much higher altitudes. This would prove to be quite significant. 8 aircraft were sent to the 335th Fighter Squadron in Korea, and they began flying combat missions in January of 1953. Problems with the cannon soon became obvious on one of the first combat missions. It was led by the squadron commander Vermont Garrison with an RAF pilot, Colin Downs, as his wingman, flying a regular Sabre. Garrison is a pilot with a fascinating career. His nickname was Grey Eagle due to the fact that he was always older than his peers. After washing out of the advanced flight training with the US Army, he joined the RAF and flew combat missions in Europe. He transferred to the US Army Air Force and achieved ace status at the age of 27. In the Korean War, he once again made ace, this time being 37 years old. He flew in combat one more time in Vietnam, completing a tour of duty on F-4C Phantom at the age of 52. Garrison deserves a video of his own, but we will now focus on this particular mission in the cannon-equipped Sabre. Garrison and Downs, with another pair of Sabres, were at 45,000 feet on a fight to sweep south of Yalu River when they spotted 4 MiGs high above them. They climbed, attempting to reach the MiGs, but it turned out to be a challenge. At 50,000 feet, number 4 Sabre called bingo, and Garrison ordered the second element to turn back. The lead pair continued to chase MiGs across the Yalu River into Manchuria. But they had no hope of catching the MiGs unless they turned to fight. So Vermont Garrison fired a short burst out of range. Downes did the same with his machine guns. His aircraft stalled, but the engine kept running. He then saw Garrison's Sabre go into a spin. The MiGs kept flying straight, and Downes followed his leader, trying to call him on the radio. There was no response. At around 25,000 feet, Garrison made an incoherent response, and at 20,000 feet, his Sabre came out of a spin. However, it took all the way to 10,000 feet for the aircraft to pull out of a dive. Garrison continued to sound incoherent, but his wingman was able to guide him back to base, where he successfully landed and lost consciousness as soon as he stopped on the runway. What happened was that the Sabre's engine ingested cannon gases and stalled with an explosive decompression of the pressurization system. The sudden drop in cockpit pressure caused severe hypoxia, and Garrison became unconscious. He didn't remember the aircraft spinning or the recovery, and it might be that the Sabre recovered itself as it reached denser air. Despite headache, dizziness, and his age, Garrison still somehow landed. This story illustrates the biggest problem of the gun valve project. Excessive gun gases often caused engine compressor stalls. This wasn't a serious problem at altitudes up to 25,000 feet at which the testing was performed, but the combat in Korea was fought much higher than that. No less than 20 compressor stalls occurred during the combat deployment to Korea, causing the loss of 2 cannon-equipped Sabres. Steps were taken to overcome the problem. Air Force installed items such as blast deflectors and selector switches, which enabled selection of only 2 of the cannons. They tried drilling holes in the gun bay door to vent the gases, but all of these were just partial solutions. Between January and April 1953, cannon-equipped Sabres flew 284 combat sorties. They sighted 139 MiGs and fired on 41 of them. 21 MiG was claimed hit and 6 of those destroyed. Proportionally, this result was better than the standard Sabre. However, the conditions were not exactly the same. The gun valve Sabres flew at times in positions that increased their chances of success. Also, their pilots were much more experienced than the average ones. Some of them were aces. Between them, they averaged 2,100 hours in fighters and had until then claimed 58 victories in Korea and 29 in World War II. The commander of the Air Proving Ground Command, the primary testing command of the Air Force, General Patrick Timberlake, concluded in the August 1953 report on gun valve project that the installation was unsuitable for combat use due to the limited quantity of ammunition carried and the engine compressor stall problems. The Air Force nevertheless persisted with testing, and a report from April 1954 indicates that the stall problem continued. Furthermore, it concludes that the Sabre's fire control system limited the effectiveness of the cannons, and that 12.7mm machine guns could achieve similar results. Despite these facts, the Air Force decided to abandon machine guns in favor of cannons, and already the next version of Sabre, the F-86H, was equipped with them, and the same followed with the Century series fighters. Thank you for your time and keep watching Showtime Moment 2.